Thank you everyone for coming tonight to hear about everybody's favorite topic, the MS4. We really packs the house every time. So my name is Ian Cook, and I'm with the Neponset River Watershed Association, and my colleague Chris Hirsch is also with the Watershed Association, and Mark Pillsbury is with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. And we are going to talk a little bit about the MS4 permit, which for people who don't like acronyms is basically known as the new EPA municipal stormwater permit that affects Westwood and most of the cities and towns across the state. And it's a significant change and something we think communities really need to be ready for. It's something that I think is going to really raise the bar in terms of what communities are accustomed to. I think it's really going to push communities to deal with stormwater outside of just the DPW. It's going to really require some coordination among different departments. And towards that end, this presentation is designed to give you a little overview of these issues and kind of what's happening, and we're going to dedicate a lot of time to discussion on how to go forward in Westwood. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to my colleague.
I'd like to start off by thanking you all for inviting us here and coming to join us and talk about the MS4. I realize most of you guys don't think about stormwater management on a daily basis. So if there's any acronyms or terminology that I say and you don't understand, feel free to just interrupt me and I'll explain. So first, I just want to give an overview of what we're talking about when we say stormwater pollution. So stormwater pollution is basically when it rains, the rain hits on hardscapes like the roofs of homes, streets, and that water picks up everything that's accumulated on that surface. So in your driveway, it could be motor oil that's leaked from your car, accumulated on the driveway, and then as soon as it rains, that gets washed down into the street, along the gutter, and into a catch basin or storm drain. There's a common misconception about the stormwater infrastructure. A lot of people think that once it goes into that catch basin, it goes to some kind of treatment plant or filtration area. It does not. 99% of the time, those catch basins just connect to a pipe that then goes directly to the nearest water body. So all of that stuff, all the trash, the debris, the chemicals, all of that runs off of hard surfaces within the watershed goes directly into the water body with no treatment or filtration, unless there's a BMP that treats it along the way. This also applies to more than just residential areas. There's construction sites, any kind of sediment that doesn't have sediment controls can then get into the streams. So it's bigger than just people's homes. It's large parking lots, it's commercial, it's everything in the town really. So an idea of what the scope of things are in Westwood, you have well over 2,500 catch basins alone. Those need to be cleaned regularly. If they're above 50% full, they're technically out of compliance. So they need to be cleaned out regularly. That alone is a huge task for the DPW. You have over 80 miles of stormwater pipes. You got to know where those pipes are going in order to manage the system effectively. And just from cost, that's a huge amount of property that you have to maintain, replace, etc. And then you have 253 stormwater outfalls. Those outfalls need to be tested for chemical discharges to make sure that what's coming out of those outfalls is just stormwater as intended. It's not some other discharge. So what we're really trying to protect by managing stormwater pollution is all of the great water resources that you have here in Westwood. You touch the Foul Meadow, where you see the Neponset River, which is a huge wetland complex. You have Purgatory Brook and Mill Brook that both feed into the Neponset. You have Lee Pond, Buckmaster Pond. All of these great water bodies and water resources that we want to protect here in Westwood. And the way we do that is through proper stormwater management. And when we talk about water resources, it's more than just the natural resources. It's what we use for recreation, for canoeing, for swimming, Most of the towns in the Ponce watershed rely on groundwater sources for their drinking water. They're keeping the water clean and keeping it in the watershed rather than exporting it and having it wash away out of the watershed is super important. And then the one often overlooked thing is flooding. But all the flooding that's going on this hurricane season, it's even more on our minds. The importance of proper stormwater management to mitigate flooding. So this is a way that I would like to visualize the effects of stormwater on water quality. So this map is based on our monitoring data at 41 points in the watershed. And basically the small green dots and yellow dots are all within compliance. So they're below the state limit for swimming and fishing for E. coli bacteria, which is an indicator of stormwater pollution. The red dots and the orange dots are out of compliance, the red dots being even more so out of compliance and dirtier water, essentially. So this plot is all of the average of our dry weather data. So this is without any kind of input of stormwater. So if you kind of notice how many orange and red dots there are, in the next slide, you'll see this is with stormwater inputs. So you're seeing during wet weather, there's many more that are out of compliance. There's twice as many that are in kind of the extreme range of E. coli pollution. And so you can really see, the difference between dry weather and wet weather and the impact that stormwater can have on water quality. So in terms of impaired waters, this is kind of a map of Westwood. So these are the lists of your impaired waters. Not all of them are impaired because of stormwater. Some of them are impaired because of invasive species or things that aren't caused necessarily by stormwater pollution. But a number of them are impacted by stormwater pollution. And then kind of put it into a broader context, Lake Massifog a few years ago was shut down due to high bacteria levels. It was deemed unsafe for swimming. And they actually had to shut it down for a significant part of the time, which is something that people in Sharon really love is enjoying Lake Massifog. And it's shut down because of stormwater pollution. It's really a shame. And then this year, the Charles River has really been struggling with cyanobacteria, which is typically bloomed from excess nutrients being washed into the water from the surrounding watershed. So that concludes my portion, and I'll hand it over to Ian.
All right, so my job is to, in 10 minutes, to explain a 300-page permit. So I'm going to try to talk a little bit about the substance of what's in the permit, and then the most exciting part is I'm going to talk a little bit about what some other communities think it's going to cost them to comply with it, which is where people usually wake up during the presentation. So anyway, the MS4 permit, this is a permit issued under the Federal Clean Water Act. It's issued by, primarily by the US EPA, although Mass DEP actually co-issued it. Right now, Westwood is operating under a 2003 version of this permit, and obviously has been for a few years. The final new generation of the permit was issued earlier this year, and it takes effect at the beginning of the coming fiscal year, July 1st. This permit is very similar in structure to the old permit, but it is a lot tougher. The old permit was essentially the first time EPA had issued a stormwater permit to smaller municipalities, and it was fairly wide open. It was, kind of a little, not super rigorous. It wasn't super clear exactly what you had to do. The new permit is much more strict. It defines a lot more specific outcomes for you to achieve, and it's much more demanding. It's really going to put a premium on reporting. And right now, most communities, when their annual report to EPA is due under the old permit, they sit down when it's due on Tuesday, and it's done the next day. Really, for this permit, you're going to have to be collecting and organizing data all year long from different departments to be able to put this thing together at the end of the year. If you don't do that for a person who's in charge of writing it, it's really going to be. The permit has lots of deadlines. It's still built around 6 minimum control measures, which are the same quote-unquote minimum control measures for the old permit. Probably the biggest difference in this version is that the requirements are very significantly affected by 2 things. One is the particular types of impaired waters that you have in your community, that Chris was talking about, and that's basically things that are impaired relative to the goals set for them in the Clean Water Act. And then the other one is this terrible acronym TMDL, which stands for Total Maximum Daily Load. And it's basically a concept that comes out of the Clean Water Act, that when you have a stream that's not meeting its standards, the state is supposed to put together a TMDL, basically a pollutant-specific cleanup plan for that water. And in our case, we have a number of TMDLs that are in effect in both the Neponset watershed and the Charles watershed parts of Westwood. There are bacteria TMDLs, and in the Charles part of Westwood, there is a phosphorus TMDL. The Neponset side of town is impaired for phosphorus, but doesn't have a phosphorus TMDL. But all that sort of plays into what you're actually required to do. So the first minimum control measure is public education and outreach. This is significantly more complicated than it was last time. There's 4 audiences you have to reach. They each have to get 2 kind of basic messages, but then you also have to give people an annual message about pet waste. You have to send out information about pet waste with dog licenses. You have to have a spring message and a fall message about fertilizers. You've got to do a targeted message to septic system owners. You have to define your goals, your audiences, who you're trying to reach, and evaluate that. And if you think it's not working, you have to do something different. Whereas the first iteration of the permit, basically you could achieve the education requirement by having a brochure and putting it on the desk at the DPW. It's not going to work this time. Public participation, this one actually is pretty easy this year. Basically, you have to make your stormwater management program document. That's another terrible acronym, SWIM. And annual reports available on your website, and you have to provide an annual opportunity to participate in the review and implementation of the SWIM. This is a big one from a cost standpoint. One of the biggest challenges that we have, particularly in communities, this is a little less so in Westwood, but some of your neighbors who have older infrastructure, there are lots of plumbing issues. And really what he is driving in here is trying to make sure that the only thing getting into your drains is runoff from roads. It's not leakage from septic systems, it's not cross connections from sewer systems, it's not, runoff from industrial sites. And this is one of the most important components of the project. So one thing you have to have is a bylaw prohibiting illicit discharges. You're all set there. You need a much more detailed map of your stormwater management system. They're really wanting you to know where your system is, what all the components are, how they fit together, and how they do or don't work together. Westwood has actually fairly good mapping. I understand you're working on making that better right now. You need to have a written plan for how you're going to do this illicit connection detection and elimination. You need to rank all of your outfalls in terms of how likely you think they are to have a problem. And then, this is where it gets interesting. You have to go out and collect samples at all, I think it was 253 outfalls across town. Any place where you find water that's actually flowing. So you go out in dry weather, and theoretically there shouldn't be anything coming out of the drain. If there is something coming out of the drain, you have to test it and have it analyzed for, depending on where you are, 6 or 8 or 10 parameters, and then manage all that data. And then, over the next 10 years, basically you need to do internal inspections in each individual little drainage system. So all of those 253 outfalls have a series of pipes and manholes and catch basins that feed into them, and you need to be going out, pulling manholes, looking inside, seeing if there's any evidence of problems, keeping track of that. And if you find anything, you're going to have to fix it. And that's actually one of the biggest unknowns with this. It's relatively straightforward to project how much is it going to cost me to go take 253 samples. It's another thing to say how much is it going to cost to fix the problem I discovered. Construction site runoff control is another relatively easy one. You already have bylaws and procedures in place for this, so I don't think this is going to be a big lift in Westwood. This is one that Westwood also is better organized than most towns are. biggest changes is that right now, stormwater in most communities is regulated according to the Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook, which basically asks developers or people doing redevelopment to manage the first half-inch of rain that runs off their site. This is asking folks to manage the first inch of rain instead of the first half-inch, which is actually a pretty big increase in the expectation. And they're also looking for different kinds of best management practices that are necessarily accustomed to the pollutants that are in those TMDLs and in those impaired waters. They also want you to, in many communities, there are issues with the way zoning and subdivision rules are written that basically make it almost impossible to do good stormwater management. You know, for example, you have to have 15 parking spaces for every square inch of office space, other things. So they want you to do a report on what could be changed in your subdivision and zoning bylaws to sort of pave the way for better stormwater management. They don't actually require you to implement the changes, but they want you to do a report and tell them what you think you could change. They also want you to inventory and rank stormwater retrofit opportunities on town-owned lands. This is places where things were built a long time ago before there were any rules, so looking for can we go back and add features to intercept and clean up the runoff before it gets into the stream at some of those former sites. On the Ponce side of town, this is really just an inventorying, ranking, designing kind of component. The one other wrinkle here is that in terms of private developers, they're introducing an off-site mitigation component. So if somebody can't manage their stormwater on their own property, historically under the state stormwater handbook, you just say, okay, great, you can't do it on your property, you're all set. Now they're looking for, oh, you can't do it on your property? Great, we've got a list of other properties where you can do it instead, which is actually kind of a nice mechanism to not compute things on the town's list. Number 6 on the minimum control measures is good housekeeping. This is my slide of source control for people column pollution. That's how we're going to solve the problem. There's a lot. Good housekeeping basically refers to maintenance of town-owned facilities, so DPW yards, schools, parks. So inventorying parks, buildings, creating O&M plans, training employees, optimizing catch basin cleaning, which basically means having a plan to try to keep them from ever getting more than half full, which is going to require more frequent cleaning than many communities currently do. Sweeping things twice and reporting how much you swept and how much material you collected. Implementing more detailed so-called stormwater pollution prevention plans for certain facilities like the DPW yard, and then there are a few other little nuances in there that relate to nitrogen and phosphorus. And then we'll go through these. There's a few more things you have to do that are specific to some of the impaired waters. So a source identification report for phosphorus, tracking phosphorus reduction from BMD. So when a developer comes in and says, oh great, I'm redeveloping X, you're going to need to keep a running tally of, oh yeah, that guy built this and that removed 4 pounds of phosphorus. I'm going to add it to the town's running tally of how much phosphorus reduction was accomplished. And also constructing at least one demonstration record. This piece, the phosphorus control plan, applies only to the Charles and is driven by the Charles River Phosphorus TMDL. And this is even much more rigorous than any of the stuff that applies in the Ponce. So basically, the phosphorus TMDL is really a phosphorus budget for the Charles River. And Westwood's piece of that budget is to reduce phosphorus from the Charles River side of town by 30%, or 114 pounds of phosphorus per year over the next 20 years. So again, you can see we've gone from sort of, here's the general best practice to we actually want you to tally the pollution reduction associated with the different things you've done, to be able to say at the end of the day, yes, it all adds up and you've achieved the reduction we've been assigned. The way this works, it's interesting. This is a 5-year permit, but this is a 20-year requirement. I don't quite know how that works, but it basically sets up a sort of iterative planning, implementation, and accounting process every 5 years for the next 20 years. So they want you to make a plan. How are we going to, do the first little increment of this, and then you go out and implement it, and then you evaluate how it went, and then 5 years, you make a new plan. Say, okay, what are we going to do the next 5 years? And it has goals for how much of that 114 pounds you will have saved in your 8, 10, 13, 15, 18 to be finished by year 20. This is definitely the most challenging part of this new permit, and frankly the most controversial part. Annual reporting, there's lots of it. So, and this is everybody's favorite part. So, estimated compliance. There are a couple of challenges when you try to say how much does this cost. And a lot of the debate over this permit over the last couple of years has been about how much it costs, and the dialogue seems to be, it's going to cost this much. Oh no, it's going to cost this much. I think it's going to cost probably a little bit more than the people who've been arguing it's down here, and hopefully a lot less than the people who are arguing it up there. One of the challenges with cost is because stormwater infrastructure is sort of this missing stepchild of our infrastructure systems. It doesn't have, there's not a stormwater fee, there's not a stormwater enterprise fund in most communities. The costs of managing stormwater are sort of spread all over the budget in most communities, and they're tracked as kind of a unitary function. They also, how much more this permit is going to cost depends very heavily on what you're already doing. There are some communities who already manage and maintain their systems much more aggressively than they're actually required to, just because they see that as part of providing good service to their community. To the extent you're one of those communities, the incremental cost to comply with this permit is going to be a lot less. And then people always ask, is there somebody else that could pay for this? And in theory, particularly if you're proactive in the early years, there are a few grants that could pay for small pieces of this, but by and large, this is a burden that's being placed on. So, in terms of cost estimates, we have estimates from 3 different communities that I'll share with you. One of the big caveats with these estimates is they were all prepared before EPA issued the final version of the permit. And the previous version of the permit was somewhat more strict, so probably they're all a little bit on the high side. But as you can see, Canton, who did, I think, probably the most thorough of the 3 estimates I have to share with you, estimated their existing costs across all departments for $767,000 a year, and they're projecting basically $1.4 million per year. One thing that's tricky about this, you have to watch out because it kind of combines operating and capital improvement costs into one-to-one. So the bottom line is the capital improvement. So you got to do a little math to segregate those down. But basically, $700,000 exercise. Can't expect once the permit is fully effective. Milton has done an estimate for the cost of their existing program, and they have only been willing to offer an estimate for what they think it's going to cost in the first year. So they think their existing program costs $865,000 a year, and they basically think they need about $120,000 to get through the first year, and they'll figure it out after that. And then my most dramatic estimate comes from Dedham. Dedham, again, is in the Charles. They have a hefty phosphorus reduction target. This is Dedham's estimate of the annual cost increase. I would be surprised if it actually costs this much, but I asked him, he said, yep, this is really what we think it's going to be. So where Westwood falls within that range, I'm not quite sure, but as you can see, they're not, even at the lower end, they're not completely insignificant. That's, I just saved you reading 300 pages of global regulation. So, and now I'm going to turn it over to Martin, who's just going to talk a little bit about the Housekeeping Stormwater Partnership, of which Westwood is a part, and some of the work that has been done or is going to be done.
Thank you. So, Westwood has, as most of you know, participated, actually, this is the 3rd year, in this partnership that the Council for the Watershed Association and MAPC jointly sort of tried to facilitate. And you can see the other communities in the Council for Watershed that have been involved with it. So, kudos in a way to say that even 2 years before the permit came into effect, these towns were already beginning to do some work and lay the groundwork and get get themselves prepared for meeting this permit. And you can see the vision is find ways in which we share resources and come up with common solutions, and not have every single town have to go to their own corner and reinvent the wheel every time. same or very similar measures that are going to be required of all these one of these. There you go. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of some of the things that resources that have been developed and made available to all the towns in the partnership, and these relate back to some of the 6 minimum control measures in the permit that Ian just talked about. One of the ones he talked about was the public education and outreach. And the Development and Redevelopment Association has put together lots of very good materials. This is just one example here. These materials are all available to all the towns. They're online through a dedicated website at stormwater.org. It gives model materials that towns can use. They can put on your own websites. They could be printed out. If you wanted to do handouts for events or mailings or that sort of thing. And these are targeted to various audiences that are required under the permit. This is another example. This one is talking about maintaining best management practices and targeted specifically to the construction industry. So it's not just for homeowners. There's these other audiences that the outreach efforts are designed. Another critical part of the permit that Ian spent time talking about is this IDEE, so-called beloved acronym for identifying discharges and eliminating them that don't belong in the system. In order to do that, as Ian was mentioning, you have to actually map your system pretty well and understand how that works, and then go a step beyond that and map out exactly where the water's coming from, going into different segments of the drainage system. And it's essentially like putting together a map of watersheds at micro level, sort of sub-watersheds and sub-watersheds around your drainage system, and see each reach of the system where drainage is coming from, so that if you can then identify those parts of the town where there may be land use activities or other things going on that could be at a higher risk of pollutants. And when you start to get into your compliance with this, you'll have a map where you can get to know how the system is working. And so one of the things we have to put together in APC's GIS and data services developed a methodology to do this kind of mapping based on LiDAR, which is a very high resolution map that shows very refined elevation changes. And this is the example that we came up with for Westwood. We've actually taken this methodology and applied it to, I think, 5 of the towns so far. We may do a few more this coming year that we didn't get to before. I will say that the town has to have essentially a pretty sound mapping of your fundamental system itself to then run this analysis. You have to know where all the connectivity is. And a few of the towns, Westwood had a good enough system to do this. A few of the towns still didn't have systems that were well enough connected so that you could apply the analysis and get good results. So some of them need going back and improving their basic stormwater mapping so they can then come up with this kind of a map. This now is available to the town. This will give you sort of a head start in meeting of this very significant requirement of the permit. One of the other measures he had talked about was looking at post-construction runoff control and looking at stormwater and non-stormwater bylaws and codes and regulations. And we have a way of putting together a kind of a model bylaw and then do a kind of a diagnostic of each town's bylaws and regulations. And this is just a sample part of a matrix that's trying to summarize different aspects of local regulations, things like parking, maximums, etc. It's getting at issues around how much impervious surface there would be and how the drainage might be handled on a site through the various land use codes. And for each of the towns that we identified, this is a highly summarized chart. There's a report that went with this that summarized areas where we could recommend some changes to improve or make those regulations more robust. Another area that Ian was mentioning was the stormwater good housekeeping tools. The partnership developed some good housekeeping materials, and we held a training workshop. We brought in a consultant who had done this work in Central Mass to help lead a training workshop for the towns, and actually that was in the first year of the project. And as for stormwater financing, as we just went over some estimates of what the cost would be, some communities are considering the idea of some kind of a stormwater fee or stormwater utility to establish a dedicated funding source for the stormwater activity and take it off of, or at least take some of the cost off of the general tax base. MEPC has developed a stormwater utility starter kit, a toolkit to basically show how that process can work, what are the steps in developing it, what are the analysis that you can do to the properties and parcels of land in your town. And we actually went through the exercise of looking at this, how that might apply to two towns, to Devon and Milton in the first year, doing a preliminary analysis just for them to get an idea how this might play out and they might want to consider this option. And it turned out the town of Milton did decide to take up on this issue, and then following that, we worked with them in a separate related project to actually develop a proposal into the town meeting, which went to their town meeting this past winter, a special town meeting in February, and passed. And so Milton now has a stormwater utility fee. It was the first new one passed in the state in a number of years. There's only about 10 of them in Massachusetts right now across the state. But it's something that communities can consider, and we have we're going to be planning a workshop on this fall, just next month, for communities to be able to get a closer idea of how this might look. Like I say, it's an opportunity to go sort of look under the hood and kick the tires without necessarily making any commitment that that's something you want to do, but get a better idea of what it might be involved. And this gives an example of the analysis we did in Milton, where it's based on looking at parcels in the community, parcel-based GIS coverage, and then analyzing the impervious surfaces and the distribution of impervious surfaces across different classes of uses, like different classes of residential, commercial, industrial, and that sort of thing. So what's next is looking at the scope of work that we have for this current fiscal year. This is now the third year of this effort of the partnership that we're really embarking on now. The work that was completed, I want to actually turn this over to Beta Engineering because a lot of the work that's been done in this particular town has been done by, as you know, by Beta, and they have some summary to give you as to the work they're doing, and we'll do some of the next steps from them as well.
Mark, can I just mention one thing? In terms of the scope of work for the partnership for the current year, it's actually the summary of it in your little packet.
All right, just want to introduce myself first. My name is Conrad Ledger from Beta Group. So we've been working with the town over the past couple of years on starting to develop the stormwater management program. Just to kind of step back, Ian, first off, made my job easy. He gave you all the bad news. But he mentioned that the town is currently working with the 2003 permit. Well, back in 2014, the draft of this permit came out, so everybody knew that this was coming. And in general terms, most towns either headed in one direction or the other. They said, we want to get in front of this, and we want to bury our heads in the sand. In the first meeting that I had with DPW, they basically said, listen, we're not going to bury our heads in the sand. We want to get ahead of this thing, we want to stay ahead, and we want to be a leader. So that's what we've developed, and that's the progress that we've tried to make in the town. So some of these numbers are a little bit different than what MAPC provided. These are the old numbers that were in the GIS. So basically what we did is we went in and we talked to DPW about where they stood in the existing conditions. This was back last year. Basically what we figured out is that they had some pretty good mapping, but none of the sites had been visited for quite a while. So what we did was we established a plan to kind of get them ahead. In 2016 and 2017, FY 2016 and 2017, we've gone out and we've started reassessing the system for the mapping, kind of finalizing the mapping, making sure that it was accurate so that we could do a lot of the planning moving forward. So as Ian spoke about, that number 3 that he talked about, the illicit discharge, is that big component of the program in terms of, especially from the DPW side of things. So we wanted to look at that and take a look at the low-hanging fruit, the things that we could attack and we knew were going to be in the final permit. At the time that we first spoke, the final permit wasn't out. We wanted to make sure that we utilized the available funding in the best way that we could and attack the things that we knew were going to be a part of the permit. So we decided that the system mapping was probably the most important component that we can move forward with at that time. And since then, we've gone out and we've mapped approximately half the system. And this upcoming year, we're going to finalize the system mapping that includes catch basins, manholes, outfalls, and pipes. What that's going to allow us to do moving forward is to be able to track those illicit discharges and then attack them and finalize repairing. Some of the other things that we took a look at this upcoming year is we're going to develop the draft NOI, begin development of or redevelopment of the stormwater management plan, and then we're going to also assess the other requirements now that the final permit has been sent out. The other thing I wanted to mention here too is that we're going to begin to monitor the catch basin plan. One of the things that we're doing is we're setting up the town to be able to go out and monitor the 50% full. We've set up the program for them. We're taking the required measurements when we go out and do the assessment of and the finalization of the mapping. And they're basically going to be able to go out on their own, measure the distance down to the sediment, and they're going to be able to assess whether or not it's 50% full. That's going to help them moving forward in the reporting process, being able to report which ones were 50% full, and then be able to have a catch basin cleaning program that will best use with the available funding to do so. Some of the things that we're going to do moving forward in FY 2018 is submit the final NOI. That's the first step of the process, really getting into when the permit takes place. That's due, I believe, September 29th of next year. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Finalize the written procedures, the IDE program, the dry weather screening procedure, catchment investigation procedure, and then the stormwater management plan. Form those initial outfall rankings that are part of that step number 3. Inventory of town facilities, dry weather testing. All these things we had talked about in our initial meeting with the town, but we weren't sure what the requirements were going to be moving forward. That's why we haven't attacked any of these yet. Now that the final permit has come out and we know the requirements in terms of time, we're going to start picking these things off so that we can get the town and keep them ahead of the game. Beyond 2018, annual reporting. Ian talked about the reporting is going to be pretty substantial. So we're going to finalize the format of the annual report. Continue with the catchment investigation. Again, this is a long-term program that we're going to continue to assess the needs. So these are just some of the areas that we're going to be taking a closer look at. That's pretty much all I have in terms of the status update of where the town is. I think we're going to open it up now to discussion.
Yeah, exactly. So part of this is we're giving you a bit of a data dump, and you all waited much more patiently and didn't interrupt as we were talking very well. But I guess the question is, you know, from the point of view of the town of Westwood, I mean, what are your thoughts about it? Is this just not great? I'm not too worried about it. It's under control. Do you see challenges here? Do you, what folks think?
I think we've been fortunate enough thus far in the past couple of years, especially working with data that we've been doing. We've gotten all this done within our own operation budget, with the exception of last year in the spring. ATM requested an additional $30,000, and that really got us into the existing contract that we have with them this fiscal year. So that's something we're proud of within the department. Like Conrad said, our goals and objectives from day one with this is put us ahead of pace. We don't want to be follower where you want the leaders. And they've done a great job doing it thus far. We're also in the works of developing our capital programs too at the outlay. Those numbers, some, I won't mention specific communities, appear to be a little aggressive. Some seem to be a little more reasonable. I won't say which one I agree with. But in the future, we're going to have close to pinpoint numbers as far as our projections go. So I think Dave's done a good job of keeping us, like I said, up in the lead, but reasonably so. We didn't go out and attack everything because we didn't necessarily know what needed to be attacked and what the timelines were. So I think we're in good standing. I mean, I feel pretty good about where we are right now, but the financial implications of that will be significant in the future that we have to map that out and plan that out.
And I know that's something that we've talked about as a group, is to start assessing now that the final permit has been released, what the needs are going to be moving forward. And I know Phil Paradis is here from our office. He's one of our stormwater experts, and him and I and DPW are going to be putting together numbers for future years as we go along. We don't want this to be a surprise moving forward, what we think the cost ramification is going to be for the town, and we want to get that plan in place as soon as possible.
What happens to the people that bury their heads in the sand and may be reluctant to be in compliance? What's the cost risk? What happens?
EPA certainly has many tools to take enforcement if they're not in compliance with the permit. And I think probably the most conspicuous difference between this version of the permit and the last version of the permit is there's a lot of things in this permit that it would be very easy for EPA to say, oh, no, you didn't do that, you didn't do that, you didn't do that, once you file your annual report. Where frankly, the previous generation made the reports was kind of like, yeah, we kind of sort of did this, and oh yeah, well, we're going to do that next year instead. So it was very convoluted.
So what's the cost? What's the risk to non-compliance? What does it mean? Because we have to go before the community and expend dollars and get approvals and task our staff with doing a lot of work. Some people aren't going to be doing that. What happens to them?
Well, bear in mind, this is a municipal permit, so, this is really about municipalities that choose to shirk their responsibility. But I think EPA has the capacity to fine you $25,000 per violation in each day. It's a violation. In practice, I don't think that they're going to fine you 365 times 25,000. Nobody likes to be on the receiving end of that attention, even if they're not trying to extract their
And I think to better answer your question too, the last thing you want to do is get onto EPA's radar. So as long as you're doing your due diligence on the permit, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, they're probably not going to come after you. And again, that's one of the goals that we're trying to do here in Westwood is to make sure that that does not happen. And once you get under the microscope, you're not coming out of the microscope. So whether it be levy of fines or basically mandating you to do things within the permit that could be very costly to the town, that's the last thing that I think any community really wants to have happen. So it's really, it's just as much. Yes, exactly. I mean, luckily the town has gotten itself up ahead of this to kind of stretch out the cost ramifications for it. So it's not, year one, you're going out and you have to do X, Y, and Z. It's going to cost a massive amount of money. It's going to be able to be spread out. It's been spread out over the first couple of years. As I said before, everybody knew this was coming. So the fact that the town got in front of it, kind of spread the cost out over the first couple of years, and they didn't necessarily have to. It's probably going to lead to better results moving forward. So.
No, the current cost of what we've been doing thus far, we've been working in our town engineer's salary that we had years ago. We didn't fill that position. I basically put that aside as our stormwater management funding. It's been extremely helpful thus far. I think the implications of the permit itself, from a financial standpoint, are going to depend upon what we absorb internally between our existing staff. Perhaps what we might hire out consultant-wise. And that's what we're mapping out as we speak. It made more sense to be patient with that regard, come up with a solid number of what we're going to confront with over the next several years, rather than do something that's so overwhelming. But I think where we are, I'm pretty confident in just in the conversations that I've had with neighbor communities and various consultants and conferences and where we stand right now. Conrad said we have done a good job with our staff spreading out the responsibility and things that we've had to take on, and made it tremendous. We've done a great job. So.
And the last thing we wanted to do from the town standpoint is scare everybody into what a number could be based on the permit that wasn't finalized yet. So we decided as a group to kind of take the small steps now, attack what we know is going to be in the permit and going to be beneficial to meet the other requirements that we think we're going to be in the permit, and then assess that once the final permit was released. So we're kind of in the process of doing that right now.
I think one more thing, we'll talk way too much, I know there's a game on tonight. I think one thing that we as an organization have to do is develop a committee again. I mean, I know that in the past there was a stormwater management committee. I think that's going to be critical within all departments to cast that upon ourselves as far as, because you can see this implication of building our own infrastructure. itself, so we're gonna have planning board involvement, we're gonna have conservation involvement, we're gonna have DPW involvement, so the development team within the town itself, and to have one or two point person people to manage, and then again, the board itself, we're gonna have data, we're gonna have, are we gonna be able to handle, those are all questions that we have to answer soon, but the committee itself, I think, is something important for us to form and establish. I'm sure communities that are already taking the initiative have groups of individuals within the organizations doing that.
Some do.
I would think it would be,
It is, I think, a great idea.
That's very good. Is there a comment on that?
So what are our anticipated capital needs in order to be in compliance with this in the next few years? And what is that likely to cost a community like Westwood?
That's hard to say. All I can really say is what the other communities have estimated. So for example, in Canton, I think they were estimating an extra $250,000 a year in capital costs. Whether that applies to Westwood, honestly, I don't know. I think there's ranges in the ins, and I think these guys and Todd, at least on the DPW side, will try to figure that out.
A lot of it might depend on what you find, when you start doing that detailed system sampling, and if you find that there are some illicit discharges, you track back to the source, and it's gonna take some kind of a project to fix that, which may well in some cases. So it really is, there's a pretty big delta, unknown factor around that until you actually start doing all that testing in the first.
And one of the things that we're doing right now is, as I said, we're kind of finalizing the system mapping. One of the things that we're doing as part of that is we're doing assessments of the infrastructure that's there. So we'll have a much better understanding once the infrastructure mapping is complete, and then we're going to start that testing program to find the illicit discharges. So really, from a capital standpoint, Bill, you can chime in on this, but like these guys said, it's very hard to determine right now what those costs are going to be. We're hoping over the next 6 months or so that we're going to be able to establish a better number of that. We do have about half of the system mapped right now. We're starting to do the assessments on the system mapping that we completed, but there's still a lot left to do. So it's very hard to put a number on that.
This is a complex permit, and it's going to require cooperation from many departments in town. And each town is completely different in terms of the requirements. The amount of town-owned properties you have, the issues with TMDL and impaired waterways, the infrastructure, your infrastructure itself. How requires, so if you have 2,500 catch basins, or you're a smaller town, you have 500 catch basins. There's two different price points there. And also the age of your system, your sewer and infrastructure. So what we're going to be doing over the next month is going through a detailed checklist that we've created to get each task done. What we're going to do is we're going to look at the permit requirements. We're going to compare that to where the town is already at. We've done a number of things already. The ordinances are in pretty good shape. We've got to tweak them a little, but and some mapping and some other things that are ahead of the game. But there are other things that are not. We got to create stormwater pollution prevention plans for your public facilities, O&M plans. We got to develop, TMD plans for phosphorus and bacteria. So what we're going to do is we're going to establish kind of where you're at. We're going to establish what it's going to take to comply, and then we got to work out with the town. And say, all right, is someone doing this now? Can they get it? Can you do it with town staff? Is it something that we should contract out, or is it something that we'll have to do some other way and get some collaboration? I know.
Yeah, that's one of the aspects that we've been trying to push, is the notion of maybe there are components of this that can be done more efficiently by multiple things working together as a
There are a number of templates already generated for IDD plans for the stormwater management plan, for a lot of the public education things. So we're gonna try to figure out the best way to get it all done. And then we'll have a number for you to say this is what's going to change.
Yeah, from the perspective of the religion, discharge, I mean, I think the community and what we have in the way of industry and things like that, I can't conceive of a lot of religion discharge. I see the phosphorus being a problem, because of a lot of areas of grass that people use and fertilizer and things like that. I'm hard pressed to find or think people who are religion discharge.
And that may be the case, and that's what we're all hoping for. And we have to start the sampling program within, I think, within 1 year of the permit. So we'll start finding that out within the first couple of years in terms of where the illicit discharges are and what necessary steps need to be taken to fix them.
And I just say, I tend to agree with you. I mean, I tend to think that Westwood's infrastructure is in better condition than that of many other communities. We actually found and worked with the town to fix a illicit connection like 5 years ago that might be quick. But my guess is that you do not have to go widespread sewers that have been in the ground for 100 years.
The reason I'm not using low infiltration that we've been aggressive with our sewer department has to be in that as well. So that program is working, and again, hopefully with the even that with the permit, as strict as it is, if something does pop up on the radar, it's massive capital expense. It's not like, I can't imagine it's going to be it has to be done right away, and all of a sudden we're going before the town saying,
Once you confirm an illicit connection, you have 60 days to either fix it or make a plan to fix it as expediently as possible.
within reason.
Yeah, so like basically within 60 days, you have to have a plan. So the plan could be, whoa, we need a lot of money.
Yeah, so there are timelines and restrictions in terms of, if you find something, what you have to do. So obviously those, when we get to that portion of the project, those will all be outlined, we'll know what those are. We do know what they are, but, and we'll move on from there into requirements.
And someone mentioned about enforcement. EPA, we're working with a few communities that received enforcement orders from EPA, mostly relative to sewer, sanitary sewer overflow, SSO. But they hit the towns pretty hard, and they reacted pretty quickly to get them fixed. So it all depends on how aggressive EPA is going to be in terms of enforcing this. I don't know that they have a whole lot of staff to go and diligently point out things to them, but I also don't want to be on the other end saying, we could have, should have done.
I'm just wondering if there's any positive public impacts that you can point to. Like, this is all about compliance and everything, but are there areas in town that are particularly impaired or polluted or something that you think that over time this is going to help? Because I remember back when we followed the Charles River, since we kept this shot, that's been.
Absolutely, that's why we start this presentation with those few slides at the beginning. We tend to, when you get into this, you get very fixated on, what are they making us do? What's the compliance? What's the rule? At the end of the day, what do you think is going to accomplish here is to get streams to meet their visuals from the water. We've seen, for example, along that illicit connection we found on Millbrook. It's fixed, and now there's not sewage going down Millbrook and into Willow Pond where people swim. Most of Westwood's drinking water comes from under the Palmetto, and the Deposit River goes right through the Palmetto. So to the extent that the Deposit River, and it's not that the wells are drawing directly from the river, but that whole system is kind of connected. So, your wells are being recharged by stormwater runoff, and you have issues, with increasing salt in the Westwood system. swimming in your local stream, or you're not having to worry about your kids or your dogs catching a frog or what have you, or, you know, if you're interested in wildlife, or if you're interested in, you know, having clean drinking water. I mean, this does tie back to kind of real goals that people put a real value on. You know, people want to live in a nice community. They don't generally want to live with a bunch of sewage tanks. So it's just when you get into the brass tacks of this, you kind of lose sight of like, why we're doing this. And that's actually one other thing we do try to remind communities is, you know, I think Westwood has already been pretty proactive in this regard. You know, most of the pavement in Westwood is privately owned. It's not owned by the town or the state. And that's why your bylaws are so important, because at the end of the day, EPA is really holding the town responsible for whether the streams are meeting the water quality standards. And sometimes they're taking the attitude, you know what, we're going to take as light a hand possible on the private sector. We're not going to make them clean their stuff up except to, you know, the absolute minimum EPA is forcing us to do it. The problem with that is all of the runoff from those private properties is going into your waterways, and it's sort of blocking the town into, you know, effectively being responsible. So one of the things I felt was good about your bylaw, you wrote it, still, as you said, needs a little tweaking. But you wrote a good bylaw that struck, I thought, a good balance between sort of the minimum that EPA requires and, you know, sort of making sure you're touching all the projects that are going to contribute significantly.
What do you do to help educate an average citizen? Because a lot of this stuff is engineering, very technically oriented, and you know, you've done a great job tonight to make it user-friendly for some of us who aren't on that. But there are residents in town who don't realize that their actions have consequences broadly. For instance, people who drain their pool water into the stormwater drain. How do you do brochures or programs, or what can we do to have an average citizen understand their role?
One of the things the permit requires is a pretty significant public outreach effort for exactly that reason, because particularly with stormwater pollution, you know, we are the enemy. We're all polluters. Already in Westwood, through the Denham Westwood Water District, our organization does outreach in the school system on both stormwater and water conservation. That's a start that is going on. And I think it remains to be seen what communities will want to do. The one piece of this that I get the sense most communities want to take a group effort on is the education piece. And we're working on trying to propose something that would be more of a regional effort to get at all these different audiences and all these different issues for exactly that reason. And also fundamentally because, you know, the voters also need to support this, so they need to have some understanding.
I think that's the key. I think, you know, what we're considering is not only mailers. I know one town that we worked with, they were limiting mailers, thinking that they're not that effective. You know, I get my water bill, and I don't really guilty of that. But possibly thinking of videos or you know, other media type possibilities that would you know, reach our greater crowds.
Well, I still think that printed material works. You know, for us as a community, we have a quarterly newsletter that goes to all the households, and I think people have got pretty used to that being a go-to place for interesting information. So we have a more not a separate flyer that goes in the mail that people look at and say, that's pretty, you know, right into hopefully the recycling, if they do anything with it. So I do think we need printed material, because this is going to prompt action at town meetings. We do need people to understand how important this is.
Right, and that'll probably you'll have one and do 4 audiences do that. So the challenge is to figure out how to best reach each of the 4 audiences. I mean, that's great. Sometimes a lot of fun.
What did they want to call that?
Residences, construction, commercial,
Commercial slash institutional and industrial.
and landscape.
The last one's industrial.
Industrial.
Landscape are like a subset.
So industrial, commercial, or is it together?
Basically. No, they're separate. So industrial's one, sort of commercial, institutional, and maybe you have college or something, that kind of thing, office parks, residential, that kind of construction.
So industrial is defined as real manufacturing versus like office.
It's not very clearly defined. It's not, I mean, there is, I mean, EPA has a whole regulatory scheme around industries that have certain SIC codes and so forth, and this is kind of, it's not defined precisely.
So I just think we're in great shape with the infrastructure because we've required subdivision of all projects for the last 20 or more years. I understand. I have to look way back to some of the old projects and see what they added to them. Ever since then, we've required.
And we are doing better. I mean, there's a subdivision under review right now that's using the new subdivision bylaws and using low impact development techniques and providing a lot more treatment than we have in the past.
And the University Station project took care of a whole section of down, everything between Canton Street and 128 was all incorporated.
Yeah, they're infiltrating 2 inches.
Can we get bonus points?
Oh, yeah, but we're gonna claim as much as we can.
All right, well, I think we've worn everybody out, so thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
And the one thing I'd say is the last page of your packet is a feedback form. If there's, we're gonna put together some brief notes about the conversation, and we'll send around a link to the presentation if anybody's interested. If there's anything anybody wants to tell us on the feedback form,